How's it, guys? Happy Monday, and I hope you guys had a great weekend. I sure did. So basically, today I don't want to do any live coding because I have a lot to show you guys. So I got a bunch of stuff done on the weekend, and I'm just going to take you through what I did and basically how I did it. And then tomorrow I'll be starting the Chrome extension, which would be pretty cool. So I'll try and do that live for you guys. Anyway, so today I want to cover a number of things. So number one is the homepage redesign. So last Friday, I just showed you how I built the basic database models and then set up the kind of basic homepage. So I've redesigned that. So how have I built that? Number two, I've hooked up Google authentication to my app. So I'll show you how I did that. And lastly, I'm going to show you how I did the file uploading. So you can, I haven't tested on AWS yet, but it should be able to upload to S3, but at least it's working on my local environment. So I can create an image through the admin console, not through my own UI, but I got that all working. So I'll show you guys what I did and how I did it. So let's get started. So let's have a look. On Friday, I left you guys with this really ugly homepage, just a basic building block kind of homepage. And so I promised you guys I would get some more data. So basically, like, take inspiring images that I like from existing websites, bring that in, and then create like a proper UI for it. So I've done that, and I'll show you what I've built. So this is it. So this is the kind of the homepage I built. I kind of like it. I am colorblind, so I've had to ask a few friends, like, do the colors match and stuff, but people said it looks cool. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. So I'll tell you how I did it. Number one was getting the data, right? So I built the database model on Friday, which is just a simple, simple like image URL with a title. And, that's all you really need to render this, just like an image and stuff. And so basically I went through the web, through like a huge collection of inspiring designs that I have, and then just pulled out like a whole bunch of landing pages, headers, little components and stuff. And then I just threw them into a folder and then manually updated my database just through this database tool that I have here. And so it's just like a bit of manual work. So I haven't got many records, maybe like just over 20 or so. And then I, categorize them so it kind of looks like real data. And then with that, I was just able to kind of build the landing page. So I built this thing with Tailwind CSS, sorry. Not the UI. I built my own components, and so it's kind of simple, I guess. The main thing I like to do is have like this central kind of column, so you can see that when you go wide, there's a bit of space around the edges, because like if you have a full web page, it's usually too wide. So most websites kind of do that column layout. So you can do that. Sorry, mic fell out. So the way to do that is when you have a big kind of section like this div here. What is it doing? So that div is controlling this header to collect your favorite designs across the web. You can use this max width screen and then just kind of say the kind of size you want. So in this case, extra large, which represents an extra wide thing. And so that's going to give you that kind of limit. And then you just chuck on a margin X automatic or auto, and then that's going to censor it for you automatically. And so you just do that on every section, and then you get like a nice kind of defined column that's nicely centered on your page. So that's a good way to kind of keep it clean. Secondly, the image blocks are kind of simple. It's just a rounded container with a slight shadow and then a slight padding with the image. But one cool thing I did do, I'll pull that up, is I had to decide like how am I going to show the images, right? So the images can be like a landing page, which are really long, like thin and tall, right? But other ones could be like a header, which is a lot wider and kind of shorter. And so you have all these different sized images. So how do you like kind of confine them on the page like this? And so you could fix the size, obviously, but I wanted to make it a bit more dynamic. I wanted to potentially have components that could show like a bit longer, and other ones that could show a bit wider. Sorry about this mic today. Well, okay, we're back. Okay, so I did a bit of digging, and Tailwind CSS has like a plugin kind of ecosystem, you could say. It's really cool, man. So like I found these two packages, so Tailwind aspect ratio, and I'll show you the other one in a sec. But the aspect ratio kind of lets you define any aspect ratio you want. So I've set up a couple here. So in this case, a square. You can name it as a square, and it'll have a 1:1 ratio, or video, which I'm using in the top to give that 16:9 ratio. And then in your code, all you have to do is, where's the video? Yeah, you just use this aspect ratio and then whatever tag you have. So in this case, video. But further down, I'm using these blocks here, which have I believe, 4:3 ratio here. Sorry, maybe my head's in the way there. So you have a 4:3 aspect ratio. You can basically customize it to whatever you want, and it's like super cool. So now you can create any kind of container, but fix it to an aspect ratio. All you have to do is give it like a width. So when you're doing a flex thing, you just say, I don't know, give it a tiny little width, and then it's going to automatically adjust that height for you. Super cool. So what I could do, let's say in future, if you had like a landing page, maybe there's a setting where you could say make them tall, and so you'd have like I don't know, a taller aspect ratio, and that's going to render them nice and tall without you having to like define specific sizes. So that's really cool. The second plugin I found is this Tailwind CSS gradients. So that's really nice because I don't know, creating gradients is kind of fiddly, and it's not that easy if you want to change the color, right? So Tailwind has all these great colors built in. So for example, you can go like background, it's a bad example, background white, but in this case, like background purple 100. And you can also define your own colors. So in the config, I think I deleted mine, but you can say like primary color, and that's like the main color you're going to use, or like secondary color or an accent color. You can kind of name specific colors, but by a name, instead of defining them as hex values. And so when you bring in all these other plugins, they can plug into that. And so all these gradients can build upon the colors that are within your design system, which is really nice. So in this case, I'm not using any custom colors, but I've got like the background pink, which is showing that pink bit on the left, and then background gradient, and then the R means from the right, and then orange 300. So it's using the built-in orange 300 color from Tailwind. So that's really cool. So you can also do kind of radial gradients, and I believe conic, was it? Conic gradients. Not exactly sure what that is, but maybe like a spiral kind of gradient. And so yeah, so now gradients are just Tailwind plugin away, and super cool. So yeah, it's pretty easy to set up. Like I said, I didn't want to do this live because it's a lot of tweaking, just like back and forth. So I didn't feel like it would be that interesting. But I hope I give you some idea of how I built it. One other thing is, well, two other things, right? So I've got this like slight kind of curve on the top. So the way you can do that is it's just a SVG, in this case, this guy here. And this is a custom SVG path that I made, which is just like creates that curve. And then you can use the view box, or you can even customize the heights yourself. And so that will let you kind of create how tall it is. So for example, if I do height 20, just do the other ones, and then refresh the page, you got like obviously a more refined or defined curve on the top there. So that's kind of cool. So it's kind of just a generic SVG I can use to like create these kind of curve shapes. one thing I do suggest is there's a cool website called getwaves.io, and this does all interesting kind of section, I don't know, barriers, you could say. So it's the same idea. Sorry, at the top here you have a solid color which blends in with the top banner, and then underneath it's a transparent color. And then this Waves app lets you kind of create your own kind of section dividers in that same way. And so you can just download it. You can save that as an SVG and just kind of paste into your code, and then just adjust the width and the height. One thing I do suggest is you chuck on the preserve aspect ratio as none, because that's going to allow you to set a custom height and custom width. I believe these by default don't do that. And so if you try and resize the width, it's going to be really tall sometimes. And if you try and reduce the width, or maybe you reduce the height, then the width is going to shrink, if you know what I mean. So this is a good example of what I do just to create those nice section barriers. I've only got one, but yeah. And the last thing I want to talk about is the stripes. So I don't know, one of the websites that's quite famous for their design and it's quite has a really nice pleasing design is Stripe itself, the company. And they use these Stripe kind of designs, and I thought I'll see what that looks like, and I kind of like them. So the way I did those is quite easy. So I'll show you my live setup. So yeah. So they're really easy to make with just a few CSS commands. Right, there we go. So we'll do this. Okay, so you have these cool stripe effects. And essentially what they are, I'll break them down for you. They're just blocks, really. But you use a not often used CSS property called skew. And so in this case, the top 4 blocks are using these 4 blocks here. So it's essentially a flex column. So you got, let me turn the skew off. So you can see here that it's a basically a column with 3 divs in it. Come on. Just like so. So it's like got 3 rows, and then I'm just using the kind of flex alignment that I kind of talked about last week. So these ones are aligned to the right using self.end because a column is vertical. So the items.end or the items.center or .end.start refer to the horizontal axis, and self.end is going to self-align itself to that grid as well. So that's kind of what it's doing. Hope that makes sense. And then it's just you change the width of them, give them the color, give them the height and stuff, and then you got like a kind of cool colory block. And all you got to do is add a skew. So a skew is just a transform, CSS transform, and it's kind of like scale. It's going to make it bigger and smaller. Skew is going to kind of shift it like that. So when you add the skew back in, it creates that kind of cool look that you can see there. And if I do like a positive skew, it obviously flips it to the other direction. So it's a nice way to create, simple shapes. And I really like it on these long kind of websites. So it gives it a bit more interesting. Makes the background a little more interesting. And so yeah, that's pretty much how I did that. One thing is, how do I do the skew? Sorry, the stripes that are offset a bit. And that's pretty simple too. But you just have to wrap that extra. So one of these components is just wrapped in a second div, and then there's just an invisible div over there, right? So in this case, I'm creating so in this case, row refers to a flex row, which I've custom defined as CSS. And then I've just got a hidden container with a width of 2 out of 12. So that just creates that little gap. And yeah, pretty simple. I think the color's wrong. I'm not referring to the right one, but oh, sorry. That's referring to this one here. So that's the gap I was talking about. So you've got a width of 2 of a gap and then a width of 2 of yellow. But yeah, I won't talk too much more on that. Anyway, so that's the redesign. Hope you guys like it. Looks pretty cool, I think. But yeah, I'll refine it as I go. So next thing I want to talk about Google authentication. So you can see the website as is. It's just a home page. It's kind of like a static page, or it's, pulling some stuff from the DB, but it's nothing too interesting. So I'll start creating the functionality to interact with the page. So add content, and then this will obviously flow into the Chrome extension that will link with it. And so the first component of that is user authentication. Now Django has a great authentication built in, but I decided not to use that because I don't know, it's just a bit easier to manage the authentication on third-party apps. So in this case, I also don't have to create password change forms, send emails, that kind of stuff. So it just makes the whole process really easy. Makes it easier for the user too. So the user can just click, well, I'll show you. They can click on login or sign up, and they just come to a really basic login page at the moment. And it's just a Google Auth login, and then you just log in. That saves as a user in the Django authenticated or the Django auth system. And so it kind of integrates perfectly with Django. So really easy to use, and I don't have to do much for it. And so the way to set that up is just follow a guide. Like there's a good Medium article here that just does authentication with Django, and it takes maybe 5 or 10 minutes to set up. It's not too hard. One thing I do note or do recommend is that you use so when you start using third-party apps like this, same with like S3, you're going to be interacting with kind of secret settings. So for example, the Google Auth, you have 2 keys that come with it. One's a public key and one's a secret key that you got to keep secret. You can regenerate them, but essentially what I'm saying is you don't want to check them into your code. And so it's a good way to do that is to create these little, or at least with Python, you can create a little .env file. And you can use a nice package called environ. I'll find the file. Where is it called? Python-.env. So that's the package I use for that. And so when you're in your settings, it exposes this it loads the .env file and puts that into the environ. What do you even call it? But it kind of like loads Python with the correct environment variables. That's what's going on here. And so as soon as I start the server, which you can see here, wrong server. Let me just reset the server. So what it's going to do is it's going to load in those environment variables automatically every time you run the Python server. And there you go. So it's loaded .env environment variables. And so now when the settings run on Django, it has access to those keys in your environment variable. So this is just a simple what it looks like behind the scenes. I won't show you mine because it's actually got secret stuff in it. But it's just the name of the variable and then whatever value you want. And you can then access that with environ call like that. And so it's a really nice way to create these settings that you want to use locally. And then when you deploy on the server, usually your server has, for example, Heroku, in my case, will have a way to set those environment variables for all of the servers. And so it's like a really good way to manage secret passwords like that. So they don't do that in this article, I don't believe, but that's a good way to do that in future. So you don't check in secret code. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Google Auth. Took, like I said, 10 minutes. Really easy to do. And so now you can log in as a Google Authentication user. Super cool. And lastly, I'm going to talk about image uploading. So I was going to do that live, but I realized like last time I did it, it was kind of complicated. Um, it's like kind of a lot of fiddling around with settings and stuff. It's not that fun to watch, I don't think. So I'm going to tell you how I did it. But first of all, let me show you that it works. So I haven't got a UI, a custom UI for this yet, but I do have a demo for you using the admin console here. So if you go into contents, so these are the same content entities or models I made last time. I've done a few changes to them, which I can show you in a sec. But now you got these cool thumbnails, which I've set up. So these are thumbnails that are generated on the fly, but also cached. And so when you upload the image and then you try and retrieve the image, it creates a little, I mean, you can make it create any kind of image you want. So thumbnails in this case. And it's also what I'm using on the front end. So instead of loading a huge, 2000 by something image, I create a little thumbnail that renders in a tiny little box you see, but they can see the full image is still stored somewhere. And so that just makes loading a lot quicker. So if we actually edit one of these, yeah, you can actually go in and, I don't know, one of my travel photos, we'll put that in. Sorry, my head's in the way. Give it a save. And then if we go back to the start, I think it's not showing. Landing DGG, let's try that. Man, I'm terrible. Come on. Okay. There we go. So I changed the image, I uploaded a new image, and then it's created this little thumbnail. It's obviously aligning to the top. You can change that to center it or other things like that. But for now, it's a working demo. And if you see the actual image, you'll see that it's got like it's just a 300 by 300 image, which you can see here. So, man, what is going on? Okay, so it's created a thumbnail on the fly. It doesn't generate them until you actually request them, which is nice. And then it also caches them. So that's pretty cool. So the way I set that up is, well, I'm using a few things. So there's two types of files that you want to consider with a Django app like this: static files and media files. So static files are files that represent like the website. So in this case, CSS, a CSS file, for example, or a JavaScript file, or maybe like the image of the video here, or the logo, that kind of stuff. So it's all stuff that's kind of specific to your site. The media content relates to all of the images that a user can then upload. So it's kind of like dynamic content that people will interact with. And so there's two ways to host them. So static files is recommended to host them on a CDN, and so that's going to allow you to, or users to access your website really fast, because all of the files are kind of hosted around the world, and they're really close to where the user is. And the CDNs are big servers that can handle high loads, and so your server doesn't load them. It's actually distributed around the world, so it's a really great way to host static files. Media files, on the other hand, are not usually done like that, because they could be huge files like videos and other things like that. So usually you would put those on a some kind of file infrastructure storage system, In my case, I'm going to use S3. And so S3 will let me host like the images for a specific user, and I can kind of define the image path and all that stuff. And then I can also limit access if I need to. So private users can have private photos. And so when you request the photo, it creates like a unique URL, which lasts for a few minutes. And so it's a good way to like keep actual stuff private. And so there's a couple of tutorials that I suggest you use. There's a couple of technologies I suggest you use. So for static stuff, there's a package called white noise. So white noise like this, and that allows you to, it kind of handles a few things. So it can handle like renaming of the files. So instead of just an index.js file, it could rename into index or like index.some kind of hash.js. It can do things like that, I believe. And in that way, the user doesn't cache the new files, if that makes sense. So when you make a change, it creates a new static name, and then when that's sent to the user, the user's browser doesn't see that and then uses the cache version. It's going to realize that it's a new file and then use the new code, for example. So I believe white noise does that, and it just handles like a lot of stuff easily for you. But it also lets you connect with a CDN. So I haven't done that yet. Might do that live at some point. But yeah, white noise is for static files, I think. For static files. And there's a bunch of tutorials that you can do. White noise itself has some good documentation, but I haven't used it myself too much yet. But I will use it soon. As for the media files, this is a good tutorial. So how to set up Amazon S3 in the Django project. And that walks you through how you can actually set up static files on S3. But what I'm interested in is the asset files. So how can you do that? And so I haven't tested this yet, but I've got all the settings working. So I've set up like the media storage backend, the sort of Amazon keys I've got ready. I've set up S3 for that as well. So it's a great tutorial to just kind of get that working. And then what did I do? As for image uploading, I used a couple of things. So I used Django storages. So it's the same library that's being used in those tutorials. And so that lets you kind of define where you want to store files. And then I kind of followed some tutorials to set that up. But one extra thing I've decided to go with is use another package called ImageKit, which is quite cool. This is a kind of lower level library that it uses, but ImageKit lets you do some cool stuff. So I'll show you my models, my updated models. So in my models, I've changed a few things. So I've created a new indexed UUID. And so this lets me create like a unique identifier name. So instead of referring to my database objects as 1, 2, 3, it creates kind of like a hash value that is better to use publicly. Other things are the same. Users are now mandatory, which is the problem I had, the data issue I had before. And instead of using image URL, I realized that Django has a built-in image field, which is really cool. And so the image field actually has that built into it. So when you reference the content, so I don't know, let's say you have your item, you can go image and then .url, and that's going to automatically get the correct URL as defined by the settings, and also for the specific image file. So it's a really nice way to, it's much easier than creating the image myself, saving the image URL somewhere. And so I'm using a rename. The rename is simply pulling that UUID and then saving it with the correct file extension. And so when I saved that image before, you can now see that it's created these kind of hashed images that you can see. And so that's kind of what what's going on there. And then the cool thing, so image kit, this is the package I was talking to you about. This kind of links in with the image field. So I've linked this image thumb to the image field here, and I'm doing some processing on it, which is really cool. So like I've got this resize to fill, and then just set the 300 by 300 width, and then the anchor here. And then I've set it's obviously a JPEG, and then it's going to be with a 60% quality. And so this package is doing all the magic for me. So when, like I was explaining, when you request the, I can use the thumbnail instead of the original image. So it's going to, when I request the image, it's going to create that thumbnail. It then caches it. So you can see in my media folder, there's a cache folder here. And that's where it's doing some of the caching. So it just creates that little thumbnail, super cool. And then it also integrates with the Django admin screen, which I showed you before. So that package is doing all of this magic here. So it's showing me the images directly in the admin screen, which doesn't come by Django by default. But yeah, really easy to set up. Just follow the documentation if you want to set that up yourself. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And so now I have a cool website. I can create little thumbnails to make them load faster. Using white noise, I can upload those to a CDN. Well, maybe not the media images, but all my static stuff I can get loaded to a CDN, so my website loads really fast. Things like that. So yeah, super cool. So yeah, that's about what I did today. Well, on this weekend, sorry. And I guess we're ready. So we can upload files now. So yeah, it's ready for the Chrome extension, really. So tomorrow I'll be doing that, I think. I'll do some coding live. And so if you don't remember, the Chrome extension is going to have a UI similar to this. So it's going to allow you to capture elements on your page, kind of crop an area that you want to save, but then save directly to my service, and then tag it and things like that. And maybe some more goodies in future, but we'll see how that goes. So yeah, tomorrow we'll start doing that. I think by the end of the week we'll have a working prototype, a bit ahead of schedule, which would be great. Sorry, and yeah, we can see what we can do from there. So yeah, that's about it for today. Sorry there wasn't any coding, but hope you found some of it useful. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow with the Chrome extension, man. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. Anyway, have a great Monday, if you have any Monday left, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.